Hey, what's up, YouTube? Welcome to my channel, Ask Jimmy Smith. Today, I'm excited to be talking to you about a topic I get asked about quite a bit, actually, which is the topic of Amazon FBA and doing wholesale as the main model. Now, I've done videos on my channel for the three main models for selling on Amazon, and specifically with FBA. The first one is arbitrage/replens. The second one is wholesale, and then the third one is private label. And so today, we're going to be covering that second one of wholesale, and specifically the pros and cons of selling wholesale on Amazon FBA, or of having an Amazon FBA wholesale business. There's all types of flashy courses out there, all types of different things for all three of those initial methods that I discussed. And wholesale is one of the biggest ones that I see out there because there's a lot of pros to it, but a lot of the cons are typically overlooked. And so I'm going to be creating a series on YouTube. This is the first of the series for my recommendations for starting from an arbitrage replens business and then growing into the wholesale model. And I'll show you why this is important in a minute. But I actually think that starting with wholesale can be very detrimental to somebody's business, and personally believe that you should start from an arbitrage replens perspective, which is what I'm going to discuss here. But ultimately, it's up to you. If you feel extremely comfortable after seeing these pros and cons and you want to jump into wholesale, well, then check around the channel to see if there are other videos on wholesale, depending on when you see this. But also make sure that you're vetting whatever course that you decide to purchase or person that you decide to follow from a wholesale method. Now, just so you know, I have been selling on Amazon since December of 2015. We've had plenty of wholesale accounts. At one point, I believe our wholesale business was about 15% of our over $100,000 per month. And we have very high profit margins with our wholesale as well because of the methods I teach. So we use the Replens methodology that I go through on this channel that I talk about in my book, Side Hustle to Full-Time Income. We use these same exact methods. If this will zoom in, we use the same exact methods that I teach there and in my course to also utilize that in our wholesale accounts. So hopefully, if you are getting into wholesale, this will help open your eyes to the pros and cons, but also you can start to apply the methods I teach on this YouTube channel traditionally on replens and arbitrage to finding the best products for your wholesale business on Amazon. So let me go ahead and bring up this presentation. So for those of you that hate presentations, you're probably not going to like this video, but I try to line out the exact pieces of information that you need to be successful with this and to really learn the pros and cons. But let's talk first about those pros. Why do wholesale on Amazon, specifically with FBA? You could do fulfilled by merchant instead of fulfilled by Amazon, but for the majority of people doing wholesale, you're going to want to do FBA. But the first pro is that, if this will go, hold on, there we go. All right, more availability of product. That is the first pro. So you've got the ability, if you are comparing arbitrage versus wholesale, with arbitrage, you're going to stores, you're doing it online or in retail stores, and ultimately you may only be able to get a few of the products at one specific store. Maybe there's 3 at that store and then they're out of stock, or 4 or 5 or 10 and they're out of stock. Well, with wholesale, you naturally have more availability of products to order. You can order in cases of 50, cases of 100, whatever that might be for the particular product and the particular brand or distributor that you're working with. So that means that you can scale much more quickly. You hopefully will have a higher barrier of entry to, which means that you have less competition on those listings, depending on the distributor or product that you're purchasing, which is a caveat there. But ultimately, if you can order more, then you can grab more of the sales and not have to deal with as many supply chain issues. Now, over the last couple of years, we are in 2022 right now. With COVID, there were still supply chain issues across the board with arbitrage, wholesale, and private label sellers. I actually did a video on it. It was one of my first videos on YouTube on the supply chain issues and how to handle those. But for the most part, you're going to have a much better supply chain with wholesale than you will with retail arbitrage. The next piece, the next pro, is that sometimes you can get bigger discounts. Now, the reason I put sometimes, because many people might think, well, if I'm ordering 50 or 100 of them, I naturally should have much bigger discounts on my products. The issue is that if you're buying from a Walmart or a Target or some other national store with arbitrage, they typically are getting the best prices out of anyone in the whole entire world, right? Because they are able to buy so much scale. So sometimes Walmart specifically, I know this for a fact, will sell below what they can buy that product for because it's a loss leader in their company. You see that with major stores around the country, that they will have loss leaders for their particular products. Well, in those cases, more than likely, if you're ordering 100 and Walmart orders 100,000, they're going to get much more discounts than you will be. And so it might actually be more expensive to purchase wholesale from a distributor versus purchasing the products from a retail store that gets them nationally and can order much more volume and scale. Now, you can absolutely still get bigger discounts than in the store. We do this all the time. And depending on how you set up your relationships with that distributor or brand, if it's an exclusive or if they're just letting anybody onto the listings, that will dictate some of your discounts as well. Because if you have an exclusive or a semi-exclusive relationship with the brand, you're doing much more work for them. You're more involved and working with them on their account on Amazon. Then many times you can negotiate bigger discounts because they know that you're helping them to expand their brand on Amazon as a platform and other e-commerce platforms as well. So sometimes you can get bigger discounts with wholesale, naturally, because you're ordering more products. And also it depends on the brand and the distributor there. So that is definitely a pro. The next thing is that it can be easily outsourced to a prep center. And I put in parentheses with enough margins. You naturally have to have enough margin to make this work for you. But ultimately, it is much easier to outsource wholesale to a prep center than it is to outsource arbitrage to a prep center. The reason is because with wholesale, they're getting 50 or 100 of an item that's nicely packaged typically. And there's usually going to be less issues with breakages and damages and all of that kind of thing. They can receive pallets with prep centers depending on the one that you work with. And it's just much more easy to get a prep center to work with you if you're doing a wholesale. Most prep centers, most of them, I would say probably 95% plus, will accept wholesale and private label. Maybe even all of them accept wholesale and private label. I don't know though. But a lot of prep centers will not accept online arbitrage as a client because there's return issues, there's damages, there's mismatches on products, there's all types of issues there. So you can have issues with a prep center if you're doing arbitrage. There are plenty of great ones that will work with arbitrage sellers, but it's much more easy to be able to outsource wholesale and private label to prep centers than it is for anything else. The next thing is that it is much more outsourceable to a VA or a team of VAs, depending on the type of wholesale business that you have. A VA, typically, if you're doing wholesale and you're doing cold outreach, you can have a virtual assistant that finds the brands, contacts the brands, sends out the emails, is able to do brand reviews if you have them going that deep and trying to be more specific with the brand emails that they're sending to those particular support teams or I guess contacts at those brands. It can be very easily outsourced. Plus, even orders and reorders are more simple to outsource to a VA, especially if you're using a software like Replens Dashboard to help you with your inventory management. You can teach the VA on how to do the inventory management and reorders for your wholesale accounts in a much simpler way than you can with arbitrage. With arbitrage, there's many more sellers that can jump in and off of the listings. You can have profitability that fluctuates much more heavily versus with wholesale. Yes, there will be fluctuations, but typically it's not going to be as heavy as it is with arbitrage. And so it's a little bit of a simpler process to train a VA on how to source for wholesale products and how to contact brands and how to do any back-end work on listings or images or titles, bullet points, etc. if you really want to start creating much more value with the brands that you work with. So you can do a ton of great work with a virtual assistant that in many arbitrage businesses, yes, you can absolutely outsource to a VA, but it's going to be a little bit more specialized in some cases in different ways than the specialization required for wholesale. I personally think that outsourcing to a VA with wholesale is a little bit simpler than outsourcing to a VA with arbitrage because there's typically less factors to consider in terms of the products you're sourcing with competition, price fluctuations, reviews, all these other issues that can come up from an arbitrage perspective, which I've talked about on this channel plenty of times. The next thing is that wholesale can provide much more stability to your business. Absolutely, this is 100% true. However, I will say that with arbitrage, the reason that my book, Side Hustle to Full-Time Income, and my course has had over 1,000 success stories, which you can find those at AskJimmySmith.com/success right there. If you want to see over 500 of those 1,000 success stories, the reason I've had all of those success stories come from that content is not because it's just anybody can do it, but it's mainly because you're able to have stability in your arbitrage business by building replenishable products. But with wholesale, it's absolutely more stable because you are able to order from a brand and a distributor. You're able to create that stability just naturally because that is the whole point of having a wholesale account. Whereas with arbitrage, the stores might go out of stock on something. They may discontinue the product. Maybe a bunch of other people find that product. There's a ton of different reasons why arbitrage is much less stable than wholesale, but even with the replens methods, which can be a stable business model, as it has been for me and many others, wholesale will still be more stable. And here we go. So the next piece with wholesale is that you can do this from anywhere. Absolutely, you can do online arbitrage from anywhere also, but to me, wholesale is just a natural step because you can order in with all of these pros. You can order in bigger quantities, you can get bigger discounts, you can easily outsource it to a prep center, you can have a VA do it, so you can do this from anywhere. That is a pro, just as much as it's a pro that you can do private label from anywhere, and you can do private or online arbitrage from anywhere as well. So let's talk about some of the cons, which is why is starting with wholesale a bad idea? And that's the main thing. There's obviously cons to a wholesale business in general, just like there's cons to arbitrage and private label. But why is starting with wholesale a bad idea? If you are considering doing this, I wanted to cover those specific cons. First, typically you will need to purchase in larger quantities. You can't just usually order a test batch of four items of that particular ASIN. You almost always need to order a case or multiple cases or even pallets to be able to get the amount of inventory that you need to have the high enough price breaks to be able to sell enough on Amazon and to be able to get maybe free shipping depending on the different discounts that they have. So you typically need to purchase in larger quantities, which gives you less ability to test a product first to make sure it's actually going to continue to sell. So that is an issue, especially if you've never done arbitrage or replens in the past and you're looking to start with wholesale first. Because of the pros that I mentioned, there are cons because you're going to have to be taking much more risk up front without the knowledge that you might have if you had tested that product first. Now, as I mentioned, there's no ability to test products, and price tanking can still occur in wholesale. It's not completely proof of avoiding price tanking issues from other sellers. You can still, depending on how you're getting these brands or these distributors, you can still have distributors and brands that are open to anybody that contacts them having a wholesale account, in which case that can lead to a ton of price tanking if a bunch more sellers find that account, open them, order a bunch of products, send it in, and not just sent in 4, but they had to send in 50 or 100, which really leads to much more price tanking. So you have to be careful if you're starting with wholesale. That's why I recommend starting with replenishable products and arbitrage first, and we'll get into that in the next slide. The next con is you may not know how to read Keepa properly yet. So if you've followed my channel for any length of time, Keepa is the #1 software that you need to use. There's no affiliate that I have, nothing like that. But Keepa is the golden goose, so to speak, of that is the thing that you need to learn to know that you're purchasing the right products for arbitrage and wholesale. And if you are brand new or you're looking to start with wholesale, you may not know how to read Keepa properly yet because you haven't had enough time in looking at enough products for arbitrage to know how Keepa works. I can look at a Keepa graph and typically within 10 seconds know if I should buy that product or not. For many new sellers, it might take a few minutes. It might take 5 minutes of digging into the data, etc. But as you get much better with Keepa, it is a lot easier to know if a wholesale product will also be stable, or at least more likely to be stable if you know Keepa, which is why testing with arbitrage first can be a much better way to go for you. The next thing is you don't have the selling data to make the best decisions. Now that comes back to there's no ability to test products because you aren't able to sell that stuff first. Well, let's say you place a purchase order because there's a minimum order amount of 50. Well, if you're not really the best at reading Keepa yet, or you don't really understand that the other sellers on the listing have thousands of units and you're competing with those sellers, or there's a bunch of other different factors that can come into play, and you don't have the selling data to know that ultimately if you order 50, you'll sell 50 in a month or two, you may end up selling 50 over a year or 2 years if you aren't really good with these other things. And so I highly recommend utilizing your arbitrage and replenishable products to look for wholesale accounts after the fact, because you'll have the test data, the selling data first before you ever order any products for wholesale. The next thing is that wholesale will require more capital up front, typically. I say typically because you can absolutely start an arbitrage business with $10,000 if you wanted to. But as I've done other videos on this channel, you can start with $0 for arbitrage, work up to $100 to $500, and then start buying your first products for arbitrage. With wholesale, you're typically going to need a much larger purchase order to be able to get much larger discounts or free shipping because you have to order a much higher volume of those products. And so you're able to, with arbitrage, test many more products at a much lower value. Whereas with wholesale, you're going to be testing less ASINs because you have to order so many more of those particular ASINs, 50 or 100 each, many times, maybe 12 or 6 at a minimum, depending on the brands. But ultimately, you're going to be testing so much more, and that requires a lot of capital, or a lot more capital upfront. Now, as I've alluded to throughout this, why should you do replens or arbitrage first? And I put replens / arbitrage for a couple different reasons. Arbitrage absolutely is buying something from online or retail stores and selling it on Amazon. Replens is the method that I teach through the book and courses and stuff that I do, where you are buying it typically at full price, and you're able to continually replenish those products from those stores because they're selling them at full price anyway. So as you buy 5 of them, they restock. You buy another 6, 7, 8, whatever, they restock. You buy 10, they restock. Maybe you buy 8 or 10 again, they restock. You're replenishing those arbitrage products from the stores, online and retail. So why should you do that method first? And if you want to learn more about that, check out this channel, tons of videos on it. But first, you're going to learn what is selling on Amazon. And this is a huge piece because as you're testing products, you can test with 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, whatever you want. Get a few of those items, send them in. You can see what's selling in your inventory, and then you can go back and replenish that. So once you learn what's selling, not just the exact products, but the types of products, the keywords that go into that in the listings, what the listings look like that sell well, what the keepographs look like that sell well. Once you get that data, it's much easier to select the right wholesale accounts and the right wholesale products for you to be successful in the wholesale business. The next thing is you can learn how to find bundles and multi-packs. Many wholesale training courses, I've been through a few, believe it or not. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on courses over the last 5 to 10 years at this point. And I've gone through some wholesale courses. Well, a lot of them teach, not all of them, a lot of them will teach using UPC lists, getting a price sheet from the wholesale company that you're working with, and you just run that through Tactical Arbitrage or Price Checker 2 or some similar software that is just scanning UPC codes left and right. And while that can be great, it can also miss out on some bundles and multi-packs that you can utilize to sell on Amazon that follow their listing rules, etc. So with replens and arbitrage, you are learning how to find those bundles and multi-packs through reverse sourcing or through keyword searching on Amazon versus just searching the UPC only. And while there is value to making sure that there's a UPC match, absolutely, based off of Amazon's rules, you can still miss out on some of the good listings that may be set up or structured in a different way, specifically bundles that might have multiple products in one listing that you can sell at a much higher profit margin and get from a wholesale perspective. So if you learn how to find those, you can take that information and apply it to your wholesale business and be much more successful in that method. The next thing is you're going to test products first. As I mentioned, you learn what's selling, but you're also able to test them on a small quantity basis. You don't have to get 12, 50, 100, etc. You can get 4 or 2 to test them and make sure they actually sell. And as you are making sure they sell and you're seeing, oh, wow, I sold 4 in 2 weeks, I'm going to get 8. Oh, wow, I sold 8 in 3 weeks, I'm going to get 10. Okay, so it seems like this ASIN is selling about 10 to 12 in a 30-day period, or maybe it's much higher or lower. But ultimately, you're seeing the selling data, you're testing those products first, and then you have a much more informed place to come from whenever you are placing wholesale orders. The next thing is you are learning how to sell on Amazon. So if you're brand new, this is the best way to learn to sell on Amazon because it's a much lower risk. You're testing with less money typically, and you're able to see how shipments work. You're able to see if you want to start with a prep center, how a prep center works. You're able to see all the fees that come out and the cash flow, all of these different data points, how opening cases and account management, account health, all of these little things, you're able to see that on a smaller scale and not be risking a lot more money and time and investment on wholesale when you could be starting with arbitrage and replens first. Next thing is you don't get in over your head because you're able to start on a smaller scale. You're not going to be placing a $5,000 order for wholesale. You can place a $500 order for arbitrage, and you're not going to be, just purchasing the wrong products at the wrong time and losing a bunch of money as easily with arbitrage as you would with wholesale, right? It could be because you're able to test smaller. You might test all the wrong products, but maybe if you test all the wrong products, you lost out on $500, not lost out on $5,000. So that's why I mentioned you don't get in over your head. Now, most of our wholesale accounts were Replens first. And so I just want you to know that all of the wholesale that I've done in the past, the majority of them were Replens first. I highly recommend starting with Replens and arbitrage because of this, because you can see what sells well. You can contact them directly. You have knowledge on the data for their listings if you need to get in a much more detailed discussion with them about how you can help their listings on Amazon to be improved and to help their exposure on the platform. So utilizing the information that you've learned from a Replens perspective is a huge value add, and why you should start with Replens and arbitrage first and then move to wholesale next, and or a private label, which I may cover in future videos as well. Now, this was the pros and cons of an Amazon FBA wholesale business, but I'm going to do a series of videos on wholesale. The next video in the series that will come out at a later date, depending on when you see this, the whole series may exist, but it will be on how to turn arbitrage Replens into wholesale. So it's not just the pros and cons of why you should do this. It's also going to be, okay, how do I take these replenishable arbitrage products and turn them into wholesale accounts? What are the best methods to do that? How do I find the best products for that? So make sure to check out that video if it has launched already, if it's already been live. If it isn't, then make sure to wait around for that next video to come out soon. But ultimately, I hope that this video helped you. I hope that you have your eyes a little bit more opened to the pros of wholesale, but also the cons that can come with it. And so if you are looking to do anything on Amazon, to sell on Amazon, and you're brand new, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you look at arbitrage and Replens first. If you have been selling on Amazon for any length of time, maybe you're doing $5,000 or $10,000 a month, then you can start looking at wholesale, in my opinion. I personally would rather you wait until you're over $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 a month in arbitrage and Replens, but that's up to you. We waited until we were over $100,000 a month to do wholesale on Amazon. That was our decision. But once you're at over $5,000 or $10,000, you at least know the basics of Amazon and arbitrage, and you can utilize that knowledge to find the best wholesale accounts and the best products with those wholesale accounts moving forward. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below this video. I ask that you like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to keep your eyes peeled for the next video on this wholesale series, and check out the rest of my channel if you're interested in the arbitrage and Replens content. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a blessed rest of your week.